Welcome to Second Nature. Jake Largess, our guest here today. Welcome to the program, buddy.
Dylan, Lucy, thank you very much for having me. Hope all is well in your guys' world.
What is your official title and role at Suunto, Jake?
My official title is North American Marketing Manager for Suunto.
Let's go.
Nice. We got some stuff to talk about today, that's for sure. So you've been at Suunto for about a year and a half, if your LinkedIn is up to date here. But I'm actually really curious to hear a little bit more about the story of how you got to this point. So from an industry perspective, to be in a role like this, what's the background that got us here? Can you start us off with a little bit of sort of the backstory of Jake and how this all unfolded?
Yeah, definitely. I look back on my career and, it's been 15 plus years now in the industry, which is, kind of crazy to think about when, a younger Jake was looking back at it and be like, what's his career going to turn out to be? But, I got my start in kind of the outdoor industry in the ski world. So working with Nike 6.0 when they had a ski team. So I was their ski team manager. Even before then, I grew up in Bethel, Maine, skiing at Thunder River Ski Resort with, one of my best friends and still a really good friend of today, Simon Dumont. So he, was blown up in the scene in X Games as the, X Games do tours taken off. So kind of got my connection through him and, owe a lot to him. And then just kind of started working my way up through there. Was at Nike for, I think it was like 3 or 4 years as the global ski team manager there, kind of helping build Nike's ski team roster.
Can I pause you there for a second? Because I'm really fascinated about that era specifically at Nike. And I would imagine there's probably some echo of what you did in the 6.0 era that's probably going to be repeated with this new kind of like ACG trail focus and stuff like that. The joke at the time with 6.0 from the outside, because I lived in Portland, was that it was Nike's 6th attempt at action sports. That's why it was 6.0. But this was also like an inflection point for Nike because they actually finally started taking action sports seriously as a legitimate grouping of sports. What was it like internally working for Nike as they actually, at least from the outside, appeared to finally be taking this category seriously?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of naive at the time because it was kind of my first job in the industry. So we would pitch ideas, whatever idea we wanted, and Nike would be like, yep, sounds good, no problem. So I was kind of like, we did a Nike commercial with one of our athletes was, RZA from Wu-Tang rapped about him and he was a part of a commercial. We did, a crazy half pipe shoot in Aspen to Whistler to, wherever it was. Basically, it was like whatever Nike needs to do, and that's what they do. They come in and they want to own the space and they want to, show the industry that they're Nike and, here's how we support our athletes. So that's what it was. It was, top standard. Everything was the best, top of the line. And, at Nike too, I didn't work on campus. I was a contractor, so I was living in Colorado at the time. But when I went to campus, they all have their different buildings of like the Ken Griffey Jr., the Mia Hamm buildings. And everyone, because action sports was so new, it was kind of like all the, say stick and ball sports people were curious of action sports. So like, what's this new trend? What's going on? What are you guys up to? Like, you guys are on top of the mountains. You guys are, supporting this global surf team, these dirt bikers. Like it was a lot of newness, I think, going for Nike. So it was definitely a really exciting time and, awesome time to be a part of that team, be a part of the company, with Nike being the brand it is. Sometimes, they got to look at bottom line numbers, and if the bottom line numbers don't align with some of their other categories, they make decisions to move on. But, I think Nike has, and as we're seeing in trail running now, has continue to try to find ways to invest in the industry. Some have worked, some haven't worked, but hopefully, especially with trail running and ACG now, they'll find a way that they can stick around and support the industry for a while now.
Jake, were you at UTMB?
I was not at UTMB, unfortunately. I just had a newborn, so traveling overseas was not in the cards for me this year, but I was at Western States and Hard Rock this year.
Okay. The gist of my inquiry there was getting at, of course, we're not going to spend the entire time talking about Nike, but curious about like your observation of their emergence as a trail running brand, sort of moving away from Nike Trail and re-embracing ACG. Do you have any perspective given your experience?
This is from my outside consumer perspective. I think going back to ACG makes a lot of sense for the brand. The ACG has that heritage, right? Like if you look back, I don't know when ACG was actually launched, but I know ACG has been around for, say 10, 15 years now. So I think a lot of people find it easier to connect to ACG, and that's like Nike's technical outdoor mountain apparel side of things than it was just trying to connect to like Nike Trail. Like what's Nike Trail? It's kind of a smaller segment, maybe not as easy for consumers to understand. So I think it makes a lot of sense with Nike ACG trying to do what they do. But again, that's totally a outside consumer Nike fan at this point in my career.
Yeah, interesting. We're headed to the World Championships starting tomorrow, which will have already happened by the time this podcast comes out. But we're going to be working with Nike ACG there, so it'll be fun to get maybe a deeper look at how things are unfolding with this in the early phases of this relaunch. It's very, very exciting, I think, in a lot of ways. Lutzi, where do you want to go next? Do you want to go further down the LinkedIn, or should we move to Suunto?
Well, I'm really, I love this concept of just cross-pollination. And I'm just, one of the things that really struck me about the LinkedIn stuff was just that you started at, Nike, and then, you actually expanded out into other sports. So like you're, doing ski stuff, then you went to Winter Sports Manager, then you were a brand manager. And so like this idea of what you might have learned at Nike and then what you might have done at Head and Dragon, like how did this come across where you were sort of picking up other sports? Because I think a lot of people in the outdoor industry are specialists. Like I'm a trail running person, or I'm a ski person, or I'm snowboard, I'm mountain bike. How did you make that evolution to grow beyond ski? Because you have this like really heavy background. You've got relationships with some of the biggest names in ski, and you've done some really major things in ski. But then how did you sort of evolve? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, honestly, I don't have a blueprint for it at all. I think a lot of it is, right timing, right place, opportunity. But I think what I was able to do in my background too, like, yes, I was a skier, but yes, I was also a mountain biker. Yes, I was also, a hiker. Yes, I was also a surfer. I was, this, like I never specialized in one sport. So I think that allowed me to, have visibility into and easily translate into the other sports where it's like, and I always approach it like, look, I'm not the pro in any of the sports, but how can I, take my personal experience working with other team managers, like at Nike, there was a surf team manager that I was able to learn from. There was a snowboard specific team manager that I was able to learn from. At Dragon, there was, a moto team manager, another surf team manager, and kind of just, pick their brains, join where I could on, any of those local surf contests where it's like, it didn't have anything to do with skiing, but jump in and, try to meet people, make connections, learn more about that side of the world or from the different sports. Because, at the end of the day, it's all sports, it's all action sports. It's all each individual's passions, and there's a lot of similarities, but there's definitely a lot of differences per the sport. So I think just taking the approach of like, hey, I'm not a pro by any means. I'm not coming in here as a background person with ski telling you how you need to act as a trail runner. But I came in with an open mind saying, help me learn, let me learn with you guys, and let's see what we can do. And that's kind of the approach I always take when it is, cross-pollination, as you mentioned, and, an opportunity to bring on another sport.
Jake, before we got started, you mentioned that you live in Burlington, Vermont. There was a chapter in your career spent at Darn Tough. Maybe that was when you landed in the Vermont area. Would love to hear about that, but also generally Burlington being a really cool outdoor town. I actually nearly went to school at the University of Vermont in Burlington, and I think in the outdoor community and the outdoor industry, a lot of times people get myopically focused on the Mountain West and the West Coast, but the East Coast obviously does have a great outdoor community also. So share a little bit about how you landed in Burlington, and especially because a lot of our audience are founders and operators and people who want to further connect with the outdoor industry and people within it. How have you found ingratiating yourself into that type of a community on the East Coast?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Vermont. I was born in Vermont, moved to Maine when I was 3. So like East Coast has always been home. Through college, I went to University of Colorado at Boulder, and then, spent 10 years out in Colorado, California with the different roles in brands I was with. But for me, East Coast has always been home. So when the opportunity came to join Darn Tough, I took that opportunity, and that brought me back to the East Coast, which is, closer to my family. I was doing long distance relationship with my girlfriend, now wife at the time. So, there's a lot of things pulling me back to the East Coast. But to your point, Dylan, like totally agree. The West Coast, the Rockies, the Sierras, they are the, big, grand, awesome outdoor activity places. But if you're doing outdoor activities in the East Coast, you got to really love it, right? Like, especially in the wintertime, it's cold, it's rainy, it's icy. Like, the East Coast enthusiasts they're the dedicated ones. They're the hardcore ones. So, it's been awesome to be back on the East Coast, getting involved, ingrained back with, colleagues that I've had over the years, even, high school buddies that are, still stayed on the East Coast, that are still now, going part of the outdoor world, whether going to the Whites in New Hampshire, going, to the different mountains around Burlington, like Stowe or Camel's Hump, or so yeah, it's been awesome. But yeah, I say, the East Coast is where you really can tell who really loves their outdoor sports they're doing, because of the the condition. They don't call it the Ice Coast for a reason, for no reason.
Yeah, it's too easy out here in California.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's too easy. All 7 degrees and sunny every day is just too easy.
So good.
We're soft. What can I say? Well, let's dig into the Suunto stuff a little bit more. I think one of the things that's always interesting when you get a chance to talk to people from different brands is that there's always stuff internally that you just assume that everybody knows, or that you see people sort of getting wrong about the brand in general. And I'd love to hear you just talk about, like, what do you think is the stuff that people should actually know about what you guys are up to, like really just kind of broad. But I'm just curious, because I feel like the brand story always gets, there's so much noise out there. There's so much other stuff going on. So like, in a little bit more crystal clear way, like, what are you guys up to?
Love it. What a perfect question. I love that. So like, what's up, dude?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty exciting time to be, involved with Suunto. I tell people at, whether it's a trade show or events, and we get a lot of time I get people saying, oh, I used to love Suunto, or I used to have, the Barrow from Suunto, or I used to have the Vector from Suunto, but, I haven't seen you guys in a while. So it's kind of it's exciting, weird time at Suunto. I tell people, I feel like we're relaunching a 90-year-old brand in the U.S. And why I say that is, so Suunto forever was a part of Amer Sports. And then as Amer Sports went through their transition with their new owners, Suunto was sold off to a parent company, Li Shang. And I think through that, there was definitely some, I don't want to call it dark days, but some longer transition period where people didn't see Suunto. We weren't, actively at events. We weren't actively out supporting the industry. We still had athletes, but we weren't really like promoting them or doing anything with them. So, that's where I get a lot of the time, like, as I mentioned, I love Suunto, where Suunto been, but now it's a really exciting time. So, yeah, we're rebuilding the U.S. team from a product launch, in the last year and a half. I think we've launched 4 or 5 new watches, launched a completely new category of open-ear bone conducting headphones. And what Li Shang has been great at is they are investing back in the U.S. market. They want to grow the U.S. market. They see the U.S. as a really big growth opportunity. So now we're trying to figure out of how to bring Suunto back to where it was, and build up our market share again, being back out in the field, being back out at the events. And so yeah, it's really an exciting time from the rocky transition period, I'll say, to now it seems like there's a clear path moving forward to hopefully get Suunto, grow the market share. And when people think of wearables, when they think of bone conducting headphones, then they start thinking about Suunto again.
Yeah. All right, so let's go a little bit deeper on that, because as you reestablish the presence in North America, it's exciting, but you also have to probably introduce constraints just to have focus and to set goals and to move in a specific direction and see what works. How have you guys thought about that? Like, to the extent you can reveal like what the priorities are, what the categories, what the segments are that you're trying to push your products within. How have you focused? What are the constraints?
Yeah, I think, any parent company you hear or you work with, like, they always want to go. We need to do this. We need to do this. We need to do this. And, I'm really focused on the U.S. market. Like, let's start with the core, right? We need to win with the core, win where we had the market share, win with the consumers that use our product, consumers that know our product and like our product. And how do we, consistently start showing up for that consumer again? Whether that's through our athlete sponsorships, whether that's through our event partnerships, whether, that's in supporting different industry media publications or whatever it might be. Like, let's start with the core where we had the presence, when Suunto was at its height. And from there, grow from there. But if you don't have that core and you don't, speak to that core audience, it's always going to be very hard to, we're not going to be a marathon road running company overnight. We're not going to be whatever the next big headphone company that is sponsoring, DJs or musicians or anything like that. Like, yeah, maybe in the future, but if you don't win back with the core and really build up your brand credibility there, then none of that is going to be possible. Yeah, you might get your quick wins, but as I mentioned, next year, Suunto will be 90 years. So, I think we're looking to be, okay, what's the next 90 years? How do we start with the core, reestablish ourselves and build from there? It's a little cliche to say, but I always feel like I'm saying it. And, we got to learn how to walk again before we start to run again.
Mm-hmm.
Dylan, I was just having a conversation with Greg from Kitworks this morning, and we were talking about this idea of concentric circles. And it's exactly what Jake is talking about, where you just absolutely nail it at the core, and then you expand to the next circle and the next circle from there and kind of grow it. It's such a brilliant way to kind of go about it. Like, get your fundamentals like dialed in and then build on top of that and then expand out from there. Because if you don't have that, the credibility, the authenticity, the execution is all over the map. I'd love to zero in a little bit more on the athlete partnership, because looking at your roster, I mean, you've got some of the heaviest hitters in trail running on your roster. How do you think about working specifically with these athletes? Because obviously they're going and competing and demonstrating and tracking their stuff, and their Strava following is, you know, on a whole different level. But how do you think about that from the brand side of things and the product side of things, and really trying to, like, I guess, wring value out of what those partnerships might look like?
Yeah, I think the athletes, as what we were just talking about, core authenticity, that's what the athletes can bring for us. So, you know, yeah, we've had amazing athlete partnerships for a long time, and that goes credit to the team, the people that are working on Suunto before me. But when I look at athlete partnerships, you know, a couple different examples is, you know, one of our biggest ones, Courtney. She's been a Suunto athlete since 2017, I believe. Just this last year, we launched a Courtney signature watch. So the Race S Courtney DeWalter titanium watch. And that, I think, is a way that we can help support our athletes and build credibility again. And authenticity is like, you know, that watch was designed with Courtney, you know, our product team, our design team, you know, we're sending Courtney samples, sending her different ideas, sending her, you know, what do you need in your watch as, you know, you're continuing to push the limits of the sport. What are you looking for? So, you know, I think the first step is, you know, utilizing our athletes as, you know, if the watch can stand the athlete's training, can stand up for the athlete's races, it's probably going to be good for about 99.9% of the general consumers. So utilizing athletes from that perspective. And then I think, you know, one thing we need to do better as a brand, and, you know, we're not perfect by any means, and, you know, hopefully we can continue to get better, but how do we provide our athletes more the data, more, you know, product innovation, more whatever it might be, to help them, you know, continue to get better within their specific sport they're looking for. So, you know, that we're always asking the athletes for insights, feedback. Athletes are tied in with the product team, and then, you know, how do we support them too, right? Like, we're a accessory brand. We're not a Nike that we've talked about before. We're not a Hoka. We're not a Adidas. Like, we're not, you know, an apparel brand. So how do we find what works well for Suunto as well too? You know, and that's, I think, something we're still developing and still trying to work on to really nail. But what are the athletes' stories we can tell of how they were able to, you know, push past something, and you know, how Suunto helped them do that. So that's kind of where we are with athletes. I would definitely say it's a work in progress, but we've definitely, you know, gotten, I feel, a little bit better at it over the last couple of years, and hopefully something we can continue to improve on.
Can we just go a quick layer deeper on the Courtney signature product? Because we've talked about this a few times on the pod of, you know, why brands should do signature products and stuff like that. I'd love to hear more about, maybe, I don't know how much detail you can share on this, of, like, you know, from the outside, it's like, well, of course you should have a Courtney signature watch. Like, that would be great. And, you know, we've seen examples like Solomon made a pair of shoes for her that, like, blew out within minutes. I'd be really curious to hear a little bit more of the reasoning, if there was more of a why than, like, we should do this, and then maybe, like, what was the result, and what feedback would you give to other brands that are considering going this thing, in terms of, like, what works and what doesn't? Because I think there's probably a right or wrong way to not only launch a signature product, but also to evaluate the success of that product.
Yeah, definitely. And, I joined Suunto as like middle of the conversations for the Courtney watch. But I would say, and we hear this word all the time, and it's definitely use it too much, but I truly believe it. You need that authentic connection, right? Like, Courtney is a user of Suunto since 2017. Courtney is, authentic to the sport. Her resume speaks to herself. So you need that, it's not just like, for me, when I look at athlete collaborations and partnerships, it's not just like, oh, let's partner with someone who has the biggest following, or let's partner with someone who's, the biggest star right now. Like, how can you really build that authentic, true partnership story? And that takes, the brand and athlete partnership to be, a couple years old, or, several years old, to really see how it works together, how Courtney uses the watch, how Suunto, can leverage Courtney. And then from there, it's an opportunity to create a story within a product launch, right? Like, so we had the Race S. The Race S also comes in, 4 or 5 different colors, and also the Courtney specific color. So it allows you to, build another additional story inside of a overall new product launch. So, I would just say, make sure that the authenticity is there, and, yes, you always want sales, but don't be focused on sales. Building, if it doesn't sell out, it doesn't sell out. But if you can create, an awesome story, an awesome partnership, showing, everything that went in kind of behind the scenes of the development of it, why Courtney picked this color over this color, and, build a story. I think that's where consumers really respect the brand collaboration and athlete collaboration stuff, because they see brands are supporting their athletes. It gives them, a actually brand story for them to jump on and be a part of a brand, and hopefully it builds some loyal followers and consumers as well.
So, not to beat the Courtney Dauwalter drum, but of course she is one of the most transcendent athletes in the sport. And I think this is at least the 4th brand who partners with her that's made a signature product. So Lutzi mentioned Solomon and the shoes they released last year. The DeWalter melon flavor from Tailwind. Sun God, her sunglasses partner, made a signature pair for Courtney too, and now Suunto with the watch. And of course, you do have to have that type of a star in a sport to make it make sense. Also, Jake, it's funny, you and I don't know each other super well, but you communicate with Harmony Bowman and Ryan Thrower, my 2 colleagues on Free Trail, and together we've been working on a little bit more of like a content piece around. It was originally going to be about Courtney's race at Cocodona, which unfortunately didn't have a great outcome in the spring. But it leads to an interesting conversation as we're talking about athletes here about, where content media storytelling comes in. And I have to say, because I've been not in a lot of the meetings that Free Trail has had with yourself personally, with Suunto generally, I personally don't know myself. So share a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to like where I was saying is like, we need to do the basics again. Right, we have this awesome team of athletes, from Courtney to Abby to Dan Jones to Dakota Jones, Ryan Montgomery, just to name a few. And it's like, we've been supporting the athletes, but how are we externally supporting them? They're all having their own projects, as Dylan mentioned. The Courtney film that we were working on, they're running at Western States, they're running at the biggest races around the world. And how do we take advantage of that and start building the Suunto story? And that's where, it's been great partnering with Harmony and Ryan and your team there, just because, you guys are on the ground. You guys know everyone. You know how to bring stories to life. And, it again goes kind of back to that cross-pollination stuff of, you know, the different sports I've been in, is like, you know, partner with people that know what's going on and, you know, can help bring your brand story to life. So for us, it's been really important this year to, you know, leverage our athletes and show some content pieces around it. You know, for example, I think Suunto was, you know, at Western States maybe for the last 4 or 5 years. I don't know how many people knew we were actually Western State sponsors. So, you know, just trying to get the basics down of like, yep, we're a proud sponsor of Western States, being on site, doing our activation, building out a whole content plan rollout that we can, you know, utilize on our social channels and following up through our different communication channels. And then, you know, if you have a champion like Abby Hall who wins this year, that obviously helps build the story as well too, and create, you know, some more brand exposure for you.
Tell me more about these headphones. Is this a new category for Suunto? I don't know if you mentioned this earlier, but when I think about, you know, the Amer Sports Suunto, it was really all about the watch. I don't recall there being a headphone product. Is that a new expansion for the brand, and how's that going?
Yeah, definitely a new expansion for the brand, and where the connection came from is from our new ownership, Li Sheng. Li Sheng has a you know, many-year history of manufacturing headphones, from in-ear headphones to open-ear technology headphones. So, you know, as Li Sheng bought Suunto, it was kind of a natural connection to be like, you know, let's also start with open ear bone conducting headphones, which I think was, you know, a smart move from the brand, because then it, you know, allows us to kind of have that full performance of wearables, right? Not you can have your watch and you can have your headphones, both from Suunto, all connected, all talking to each other. So you know, it's been 3 years now since we've had our headphones, and, you know, we're definitely seeing a lot of growth with the headphone. And it's, you know, the bone conducting category is new as well too, but it's an exciting category. I think there's a lot of benefits that the users enjoy. You know, at the different shows, at the different events, we have our headphone demos, and, you know, when people put them on for the first time, you always see their faces of like, whoa, whoa. So it's, you know, having that nothing in your ear, being able to hear your surroundings while listening to your music or your podcast or whatever it might be. People really enjoy that. And then, you know, just from a safety aspect too, it allows, you know, so much for safety to hear what's going on, and whether runners are coming behind you, bikers are coming behind you, whatever it might be. So it's been a, you know, definitely exciting category. Gives, you know, the brand another product story to talk about through our different channels. And I think you'll continue to see our growth in the headphone category as well too.
That bone conducting stuff is crazy. What's that line about, like, any kind of advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic or something like that? I'm looking at this thing here too. There's a swimming algorithm, because obviously you can wear these when you swim because they're waterproof. There's an algorithm that tells you if you're swimming correctly or efficiently. Is there, I don't want to like tip your hand at all, but I feel like if you can do it for swimming, is that a running application too at some point?
I mean, I think definitely it is, with, you know, how fast technology is expanding and growing these days. I definitely, you know, would say it's something. But yeah, we have our Aqua headphone, which is, you know, completely waterproof. So, you know, for people, I am not a, you know, big swimmer myself, but what I hear is, you know, if you're doing laps in the pool, it's boring. You know, it's back and forth. So people are looking for, you know, how do you make that time go by a little bit quicker, and that's where, you know, the Aqua headphone can come in, where it's all downloadable music to it as well too, so you can load your music directly onto the headphones, press play, do your laps, and have music the entire time while you're swimming.
This algorithm thing looks crazy.
Yeah, like it just learns from it, just as you use it more, as it learns your stroke rate, as it learns where your head movement is. Like with the headphones too, you know, you can have a setup where it's like you shake your head left to switch to the next song, you shake your head right to answer a phone call or decline a phone call, and it's all hands free.
Good grief, man.
This is amazing.
Okay, while we're on the subject of technology, it makes me want to ask about the collision of hardware and software, because I'm sure as you guys talk to customers, more and more people are probably making buying decisions based on the software side of things too. And what watches do, obviously, is collect a lot of information, and software usually helps us visualize and understand that data and information more effectively. Talk about how you guys discuss those things internally and how Suunto invests in the software side of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. The software needs to be just as capable as the hardware. And how Suunto looks at that is we have, a product hardware team, and then we have a full built out software team as well too. And I think I just am coming back from a company summit in Finland last week, and the software manager there, I think in his presentation, he was telling us there's like over 200 or 300 software applications that people are applying to Suunto of, hey, we want to integrate with your Suunto app. I can offer you this or that. And if we just today we rolled out a new software update for our Ocean Watch that just launched. So I think software is something we can never 100% always keep be ahead of, but we're always trying to update the software with new features, with new tracking metrics, with new whatever kind of the industry leads us to of what it's looking for. We have a software team that is always developing that. And I think another thing where Suunto is really open, we want to partner with all of the different apps from Training Peaks to Strava to everything like that. How can we make everything tied together, from the watch to the software to the headphones to whatever coaching app you might be using? How can we have it all tied together so as the end consumers looking for all their metrics, they don't need to go there, and there. They can just go one spot and have it all in one place.
It's interesting to think about what those partnerships might look like, and sort of how you evaluate the partnerships. And you guys obviously make both hardware and software, but how do you think about, specifically in North America, like you're already looking at athlete partnerships and event partnerships, but what's your approach to hardware and software partners?
Yeah, I mean, I think the approach is like you got to look at the opportunity. Right, like whoever the software developer is pitching to us, they're going to say it's the greatest opportunity ever. So I do think you need to be, set some standards and guidelines to be like, okay, is this software update really worth it? Right, like there's a lot of work that goes into a software update, but if you do a software update and it's only valuable for 2 people, is it really worth it? So it's like understanding the market, understanding what your end consumers are looking for, being out on the different community threads, seeing the different comments that are happening, and evaluating from there when it comes to software. So it's, is this something that the industry really needs, or is this something that someone just has, a personal passion for? And, it's always a balance of what to do, and at the end of the day you can't do them all, but hopefully you can pick the ones that will have the most impact and help the brand grow.
So of course, I think what a lot of people associate with your products are the watch you put on when you're going to go for a long trail run and you want to get all the vertical stats and the pace and the chrono, etc. But I think also more and more there's this trend of quantified self and people wanting to gather information about their bodies, not only during activity, but also the rest of the day. So, obviously we've seen the rise of Whoop and Aura Ring, et cetera, sort of being the leaders, I guess, in that version of a wearable. Do you view them as competitors, or have you guys, I'm sure you guys talk internally about how your products can be useful outside of the couple hours a day you spend exercising and can provide good information on, how your body's recovering, et cetera, things like that?
Yeah, and I think that, with GPS watches in general, I think that is a little misconception for the industry, right, Dylan? As you mentioned, I think a lot of people see their watches as like, I can only wear my watch when I'm doing my activity, to train my distance, to train my timing, to train my elevation gain, to whatever it might be. But, our watches also have other recovery metrics to it. You can track your sleep on it. You can track your heart rate on it. You can track your recovery time on it. So after a workout, it can tell you, what your recovery time will be. And, I don't look at as GPS watches as just training. They're everyday watches, right? Like they can provide the benefits that a Whoop, an Aura Ring, which, this is all great, but the watch can provide all of that, plus all of your, specific exercise metrics you're looking for. So it's really, a all day, everyday piece of equipment that you can have on your wrist for, whatever the level of tracking metrics you might be looking for.
Thinking about that sort of everyday usage and how that might relate to marketing, I'd be curious of like how you lay out your marketing calendar, because obviously you have some big partnerships with these races and stuff, and it would be easy to use those as kind of like your tentpole events that you rally a big marketing support around for both, sales and brand growth. But also thinking about, it's a product that anybody can use. You don't have to be running to the top of a mountain or diving as deep as you possibly can. How do you think about sort of the overall marketing of the product? Like, do you go, in on other big moments, or do you really kind of save your powder for those big races that you're supporting? What's the kind of mix?
Yeah, I think that's, understanding your target audience, right? Like if we go and show up at Western States, that's a pretty core, authentic audience. So we're not going to, I'm not going to go and talk to someone of like, hey, look at your watch. Did you know it could track your altitude? That's something they know. Maybe we can go in and we have a zone sense feature, which zone sense is, it learns your training abilities and helps you keep your training and your heart rate in specific zones as, you're doing your long run. So something that's more technical, I would speak to, the Western States audience as that. But if I go to, say, a more general, broader, say we're sponsoring a local 5K, where it's a lot of people that are just running for their first time, it might be their first 5K, then, you got to kind of dumb it down a little bit and talk to them of what might be interesting to them. Because if I go start talking about the super, technical metrics of it, it's just going to go directly over their head. So it's kind of knowing your target audience, understanding what marketing messages would relate to them in that audience, and then building your content, building your assets, building your messaging around that.
Just to go just a little bit deeper on that, what's the mix for you? How much are you speaking to that core race consumer versus kind of the everyday? Yeah,
right now it's we're speaking to the core, right? Like as I mentioned before, yes, would I love to show up at New York City Marathon, at all the major marathons, at a bunch of 10Ks, 5Ks around the world, around the U.S. 100%. But we also have to balance budget, resources, everything like that. And I think for us, we've focusing on that core audience, focusing on that audience that knows a little bit of Suunto, has a little bit of Suunto, but maybe Suunto history, but hasn't seen the brand in the last handful of years. That's really where our focus has been. And, going back to, we got to win with the core. So if, we can win with the core, reintroduce them to Suunto, to the brand updates, to the athlete updates, to the product updates. I think from there, once we start hopefully seeing some good wins there, then we will start branching out. But we just at the time can't be everything to everyone. So strategically picking your target audience, strategically picking where you want to focus, and actually staying there, which is kind of hard to do sometimes because there's so many good opportunities. But if you can build that consistency in that over a handful of years, then I think that's where you really will start seeing some good brand growth, and you'll see the brand longevity as well too.
So maybe last question before we get to BPC. I know by the time this podcast comes out, there's going to be a big product release. You want to give us the big sales pitch here? Let people know what's coming down the pipeline. Sounds pretty exciting.
Yeah. So, the last month or last 3 months, we've launched 2 new products, the Race, or it was the Race and then the Race 2, the Wing and the Wing 2, and then coming out now on the 30th of September, our newest product is the Vertical 2. So we launched the Vertical 2.5 years ago, and the Vertical is really the first updated product for Suunto in several years, right? Like it kind of put Suunto back on the map, brought us, closer to what our competitors were doing. And that product has been out on the market. We're able to take all of our consumer insights, athlete feedback, testers feedback of, this works, this doesn't work, and we've made improvements to it. So, Vertical 2, brighter, bigger AMOLED screen, a faster processor, so faster software for everyone to use. And then one of the bigger ones that Suunto, kind of gets knocked on for in the different forums is our heart rate monitor, and we've improved the heart rate monitor and updated the heart rate monitor based on direct feedback that consumers have given us. So taking our learnings of the Vertical and launching the Vertical 2, which comes out on the 30th of September, and excited to showcase that at upcoming UTMB Kodiak. So if anyone's there, we'll have a on-site activation. We'll have the Vertical 2 there where you can kind of come feel it, touch it, play around with it, and go from there.
Yeah, so it's positioned as sort of your top of the line trail running watch, right?
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yeah, we have,
or like an outdoor watch.
Yeah, I see a mountain bike mode on here. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, for Suunto, we have 2 kind of performance categories. We have our adventure category and then our performance category. So the Vertical 2 falls in that top of the line adventure category. So people doing ultras, doing multi-day mountain trips, whether hiking or biking or whatever it might be. That's where the Vertical 2 fits into our product assortment.
And you said the other was performance. Is that the other category?
Yeah, other performance, and that's that's more of your super hardcore shorter distance training, where that consumer probably is running 5 or 6 times a week, is following a specific training program, probably has part of a run club, probably is a part of has a running coach. So that's kind of where we segment the performance and adventure categories.
Awesome. Anything else from you, Lutzi, before we get to BPC?
I like that where it's rowdy and extra rowdy. Performance, adventure.
Exactly.
There's a lot to work with there in terms of like developing content, working with athletes. I mean, that seems like a lot of fun.
It is a good framing. Yeah. Yeah, and it's a nice product recommendation here as we bridge to BPC. So, Jake, you're our guest here. I think you know the gist of this closing segment where we talk about something that we have noticed or that has inspired us in the categories of brand, product, or content. What did you bring to share with the audience today?
Yeah, I think what I share is kind of just, hopefully Suunto and our, our overall investment back into the U.S. market from a product perspective. So, as I mentioned, you look over the last 2 months alone, we've launched 2 new watches and the Wing 2, and a new headphone, excuse me. So I think just, what's new, what's exciting is Suunto. We're back investing back in the market, or back, supporting our athletes, supporting the industry, supporting events, and hopefully we can continue down this path and continue to grow and reestablish the market share that Suunto once had.
All right, that's kind of a cheating answer, but we'll accept it.
Yeah, it was. It was, but there wasn't one specific thing I could harp on. Or it's just a lot of exciting times happening at Suunto. So, I had to take the advantage to really put in that brand plug.
I do think it's really fun to sort of put something back on the map and start releasing new stuff. And, there is something really, just as an exercise as a marketer, this has got to be a lot of fun to actually be working on, because the brand is established, but then to give it kind of that new sheen, to release new stuff, to open new categories, like that is a case study that anybody among us would probably chase down, Yeah,
I mean, that's as I mentioned, it's like relaunching a 90-year-old brand. It's definitely a fun opportunity to be a part of.
I'll jump in here. I'll go next. I've actually used this for a BPC, but it's a seasonal thing specifically, and I feel like now is a great time to share this one. My brand is Vessi. It's a Seattle-based brand, and Dylan, you've probably seen me wear these a billion times, but they are waterproof shoes and boots, and I have had the same pair for the last 2 years, and it is all time. Because this pod is coming out in October and we're all about to get dumped on, take this as
Speak for yourself, bro. I live in NorCal.
It's always sunny out there, remember?
Yeah.
No bad weather.
As your friend from the Northwest who is about to get drenched for a solid 4 to 6 months, I'm sharing with the rest of you that waterproof shoes are life-changing and necessary, and this brand makes really good ones. And I bought these like on a whim from like an Instagram ad 2 years ago, and I pretty much haven't taken them off since. I even wore them through the summer, and people made fun of me for wearing scuba boots, but man, they are all time. I'm just saying. Yeah,
they do look like good products. I don't own any myself, but I've admired yours on at least a couple of occasions. All right, great. I'll close this down. Are you guys familiar with a brand called The Row?
Don't think so.
Okay, I feel a little bit less ignorant at this point, but
ROW, like The Row?
Yeah,
okay.
the ROW.com.
Okay.
Yesterday was my 8th wedding anniversary, so my wife and I went out to dinner, and she brought up this brand, The Row, and immediately it was like, this is fascinating. Effectively, long story short, it is like evidently like the hottest luxury fashion brand out there right now. It was founded by Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen, who, are probably my age at this point, late 30s, getting close to 40 probably. But of course made their claim to fame as the adorable daughter in Full House, and then had, successful kind of acting careers. But I think they've sort of been out of the public limelight for the most part for the last 15 or 20 years. Certainly I don't see anything about them. But they founded this company called The Row, and I haven't done a deep dive on the history. What makes it interesting, though, is number one, hot brand for like luxury fashion type people. Number two, they don't have an Instagram account. And I don't think they have, I don't know what their distribution strategy is, but they've built such a rabid community and fan base of consumers who love what they do. And if you go to therow.com, you'll see it's like ridiculously expensive stuff. Certainly I'm not in their target demo, but you can see that they probably have cultivated a really valued or desirable consumer, and they're doing it in just such a different way. And so I want to do more research on The Row. Maybe we'll expand on this conversation in a future episode, but I wanted to share it here because I think it's just very interesting of like not having a digital footprint in 2025, yet still being super hot. And it's probably part of the reason why they're so hot is because there's maybe this mystery and exclusivity and an absence from a place where every other brand is, being incredibly active. So anyway, Lutzi, let's talk about it more in a future episode. But the row is definitely not outdoor, but you could see how maybe you could take a little bit of that energy if you were starting a new brand and try and be a little bit like the row.
The constraint that you mentioned earlier, I feel like is, if you didn't have an Instagram account, how would you grow? How would you establish? What would need to be true for you to still be successful without that?
Yeah. It leads to an interesting combo that I want to have with you too, Lutzi, about, because now like being a Substacker is kind of like a thing where people have built amazing businesses on Substack, but who don't have like huge social media followings. So I don't know. I think there's an interesting convo there too, because typically, you build the distribution, you build the following on one platform and then transfer it over to your email list, right? But Substack, I think this is evidence of them building an ecosystem of their own and a network of their own to where you don't have to be big on Instagram, you don't have to be big on Twitter, but you can have a really successful business on Substack. To me, that's very interesting and compelling. Jake, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just saying we should earmark this conversation to see, right? Like 20 years ago, social media wasn't a thing, but brands were able to, establish themselves. Are we moving back away from, you hear all the time, like people are over all the digital stuff of just getting served this all the time. So interesting concept, interesting that it's happened, and, earmark it now to look back at it in, 15, 20 years to see where marketing is going and brand building is going.
So interesting.
I dig it.
Jake, you're the man, dude. Thanks for coming on Second Nature. Excited to potentially maybe join one of the meetings that you have with my colleagues at Free Trail about future products. But good luck with the launch of the Vertical 2, and thanks for coming on the show.
Awesome. Appreciate everything you guys do and having me on, and hopefully see you guys soon.